Quick play hacked, pickable passives are here. I'm going to break down really quick what I think about them, what I like and what I dislike. So I will start this with a bit of a disclaimer. I have been kind of against this idea of the pickable passive, the build type game, like more like League of Legends or a MOBA or something where your build kind of changes throughout the game. Or, you look at a Tracer and she may have one certain thing going on or another thing. Basically, I want Overwatch to be as easy to read as possible. Whenever you see a character, you know exactly what they do. To me, changeable passives, abilities, anything in that regard kind of breaks that. And I think that is something we want to avoid. But I went into this with an open mind because I wanted to test it out, see if this was legitimately something that they're trying to work on, see if they like it or not, or if the community likes it. So after playing each role a fair amount, I can say that I am not really a fan of how it's currently implemented, and I think it's going to be hard to say like how well this would work for the game without some of the things I'm going to talk about being added to help alleviate some of the initial frustrations with this new kind of stuff. So before we get into all of that, I'm just going to go ahead and talk about each passive in general, and then I'm going to talk about overall what are some things that I thought about it. So the unyielding passive, so this is the debuff duration reduced by 40%. To me, this seems really niche and not really worth it to go for. Basically because the other two I think are just way more interesting. They're more interesting and they're more useful overall. The unyielding one to me seems much more counter pick focused. The other two are much more just general gameplay tweaks, and we'll talk about those. But yeah, overall unyielding. In fact, I don't even know if I used this more than like once because it just doesn't feel like it's doing really that much. Specifically against like Ana or I guess like burn effects would last less amount of time, but I don't think that really matters. Those aren't as strong. But like against Sombra hack, but even then, Sombra hack is pretty quick as it is. So I don't know if it's exactly worth it to get that much of a debuff or duration decreased. The armor one, that is going to be your solid option for just like, I don't really know what to do. Let me just get some solid tank survivability. I'm going to talk about them later, but this is one that is just like a flat buff for the entire game, basically. I'm not a huge fan of these passives, but yeah, I mean, like, this is one that definitely helps. In my opinion, this helps tanks that already have a healthy armor pool way more than it helps tanks that don't have one at all. Because to me, it sounds like, oh, if you give a tank armor, it's going to be like, oh, like a Roadhog with armor. That sounds pretty good. But it's only like a fraction of his health bar. It also helps heroes with, what's it called? Smaller health pools, like a Zarya, more than somebody like that. But this definitely just like makes the super tanky characters like Diva and Reinhardt much harder to kill. I do not think this is actually going to be used for the characters that don't have armor. This is just going to make those other characters way harder to kill. I don't think that's a great idea. I think that's going to cause a lot of frustration. I felt like Diva had like 17 million armor. It was actually crazy. This one, Last Stand, I think this is my favorite passive out of the bunch because this is a really interesting idea where 50% cooldown reduction while you're below 50 HP. This encourages aggressive play. This encourages decision making about whether you actually want to shoot the tank or not, right? So this actually gives characters what I like to call indirect survivability, where if you know they have Last Stand, it's like, is it worth it for me to shoot this guy here? Because if we don't kill him, then he's going to get his resources back, right? Like if this Doom is in our backline, he's going to get all his resources back and be able to get out. Or should we just kind of let him be and then wait for a better moment to where we can kind of like ride the line better so he's not going to have his cooldowns to get out? Stuff like that. I feel like that's really, really interesting. You have a decision as the one being attacked, basically. How are you going to interact with this tank. This was really good for those tanks that are typically lower health or have some way to sustain. So I think characters like Doomfist, like Ball, like JQ, they all benefit from this a lot. I think Sigma actually benefits from this a lot because he's pretty, like, it's pretty easy to keep himself in a decent range to where this would be viable to get his health back up because he has the shield that can mitigate all his damage. So I do really like this one. I will say I think this could just be a better mechanic on a completely new hero. I don't know about like a passive or something, but this is I think probably the best direction. It is not up all the time. There is not inherent value just given for free. You have to still be skillful and mindful of this part of the kit. So I think this is like the best gold star approach about like how these passives should be implemented. Moving on to the DPS category, I think these were probably the weakest overall. Not really interesting that much. Slayer, see critical health enemies through walls, so you just get part of Opportunist back. And yeah, I think this is generally not very useful, especially in like team environments when people are pinging and everything. There's very niche scenarios that you would use this in, and I don't see it really being that much of a factor. Trigger happy, this is definitely good for higher clip characters. Just increase ammo by 20%. To me, it felt the best on characters that typically have lower ammo counts, and then just because they're balanced around having not that much ammo. So if you were able to give them more at all, like a Venture, for instance, who gets 2 extra bullets, that is, I think, pretty significant. Characters that have larger clips, honestly, it doesn't feel like they benefit as much. I know it's 20% either way, but we'll talk about that for a different passive later. But I think that there's like a sweet spot of like where it's like not necessary or like kind of too much, right? I think for a lot of people it's not necessary, but for certain characters, I mean, giving Cass an extra bullet in the clip, I think is really good for him. Stuff like that, right? I think Genji probably also would really like to have extra ammo as well. So yeah, I think this is fine. But again, it's one of those passives that just kind of gives you a buff, just kind of always, and those are a little lamer to me. There's not much thought behind it. It's just kind of there. Frenzy. Eliminations grant a brief 30% speed boost. This was an old passive that only benefited certain flanking characters. I like this one on paper. In practice, it can be really frustrating with certain pairings. Genji with Blade comes to mind. It is actually just a nightmare trying to avoid Genji Blade when he gets a 30% speed boost after every kill and his dashes reset. Like, there are certain characters that definitely benefit from this disproportionately from the other characters. And the reason why this I think is a problem is that this is very strong on certain characters, and the options that those other characters have that don't really benefit from Frenzy are not nearly as strong. And there's certain character who just does not benefit from really any of these very particularly well. And that is Hanzo, because Hanzo does not care if he gets a speed boost for eliminating an enemy. He is not in the backline. It doesn't matter to him. Trigger happy, he literally doesn't have ammo. So he cannot, he doesn't get anything from that. And also Slayer, he has an ability that lets him see through walls anyways, and he's not going out of his way to try and hit low health targets. So Hanzo was definitely left behind. There are other characters that I think, like Bastion, would really only ever take Trigger Happy. There's a lot of characters that would only ever take this one. So with the pool of them that they have right now, not a great selection in my opinion, especially for the DPS role. Supports. Here's another one, resourceful, reduce cooldowns by 20%. This is crazy. This is such a crazy good passive skill. Just like, there's no thought behind it. Your character is just better. Right? There's nothing that you have to do to change. Your character is just better. This is another one of those instances where it definitely helps certain characters more than others. At first you would say, oh, Baptiste has really long cooldowns and I can reduce them by 20%. So I can have Lamp Up after a couple seconds earlier. And like, yes, that is really strong and powerful, but I want you to think about this. Think about a Kiriko who can swift step every 5 seconds and Suzu every 10 seconds. Even though those are shorter cooldowns, and again, they're getting the same percentage difference, I think that one is better. I think Kiri is like better. Moira's were kind of unkillable this patch. Her fade is on like a 5 second cooldown or something with Resourceful. And that is way better than just having Lamp up instead of every, what is it, like 26 seconds or to like 20. I don't know. I'm not going to do the math. I know 20% is really easy, but I don't care. You know what I mean? Like I don't like I don't like this one. I think this is too powerful for most characters in the roster. It is a super easy fallback. You don't have to think about it nearly as much. It's just making the characters better. There's no dynamics here. Swift save, increase healing by 50% for targets below 35. I think this one is dangerous. 35% I think is maybe a little high if they wanted to do this. Because again, this one isn't like this is a little more active, and you have to think about like, what if I save my resources, my big burst resources, to when they're in this threshold, and they get way more healing because of it. Then you make some skillful plays around it. You're actually thinking about it. So I think this one is good on paper, but I think the numbers may need to be adjusted because I can see this being a big problem going forward. But this is perfectly fine. Close call, gain a brief 20% speed boost when below 50% HP. This one seemed a little niche, and seems better, or it seems better than it actually is for most characters. 20% speed boost is not going to be enough to save a Zenyatta if he goes below 50% HP while he's getting dove by actual dive characters with mobility. So I don't really see. I see this more of like Lucio probably benefits from this a lot, just to be able to get out even faster than he actually was. But like most characters, I don't think they would be much better taking off one of the other two than this one. Now, Zen kind of has to have this one because resourcefulness doesn't do anything for Zen, and close call or a swift save, it's like he's not really saving anybody. That's not really how you use Discord anyway, or Harmony. So again, like some characters kind of just have to take this by default. And it's just, again, it's one of those things where it's like, it's just not as good as what other characters get from it. It's supposed to be, when you have pickable passes, there's supposed to be at least like some leveling the playing field and making sure everyone has something that they can use. And it still, in my opinion, does not work as well as it should. And that's going to be like my first critique, is just that some characters still benefit way more than other characters, right? Hanzo and Zenyatta kind of get left in the dust while Kiriko gets to feast, right? So I'm not super into the entire list that they have. And again, the passives that are just like baseline buffs and don't actually change the dynamics of the character, I think like that's really boring, and why are they even here in the first place, right? Another thing that I think is really a problem with the actual passives themselves is that I think this definitely exaggerates the counter swapping problem, because now every single character on the roster has some way to counter pick you. And I think that's also exacerbated by the issues of these just flat buffs where you can just make your character better against those other characters. And now the outplay potential is less. And that is then going to force you to play a different character more so than you would. Like, you literally can't outplay as much. You just have to be forced to swap onto other characters. And that's basically for the whole roster. It's not just like a tank swap tanks. Now this can be, anybody can do it at any time, much more often. And I think that is definitely a really bad domino effect that they need to try to avoid if they wanted to actually go with this. Again, especially for these reduced cooldowns by 20%, increase ammo by 20%, and convert 100 health to armor. That's too easy. It's too easy just to get inherent value out of. I think there's just, you swap and then make your character better. You don't even have to change anything. You don't even have to change your character. You swap your passive and make your character better. I don't really like that idea. I think there should be a little more thought behind every decision like that. Also, how they've implemented it, I never, ever, ever, and there's no way to know without observing and playing the game, you can never understand who has what passive when. It is hard to learn these new, like to play around these new types of things when you literally don't know when people have it. You just kind of have to take a guess. You're like, that fade felt a little earlier than the last one, or like than it's supposed to. So I think Moira has the cooldown resourceful one or stuff like that. I think that is a really big problem, because I can't make a fight plan, especially about against like some of these like last stand. You know, if I go dive or like try and hit a tank who's got less HP, like below 50% HP, and I think that I'm going to be fine, I'm like tracking their cooldowns, and all of a sudden they punch me or fly out or something, and I didn't realize that they had it, or something like that. You know, like a Mauga shout happens when I thought I was completely safe. That's really frustrating because it's hard to play around, especially with The Last Stand, which is something so dynamic about this could be changing the cooldown, not just 50% faster, but what if they're already halfway to it, so it's actually like only 25% faster, but you're still not expecting it, or maybe they're going in and out of the threshold, so you really can't even track how close they are to that ult or ability. You have to like take a range. It's really, really complicated. And it's just hard. It's just hard to tell. There's no visual indicator, nothing on the scoreboard. You can't even see what your teammates are running. I think that is a really big problem, and that definitely dictates playstyles about knowing what passives people have. So I don't think we can really get a good grasp about how the game would play in the long term without those features. Because if they did implement them, I guarantee you they would be in the game. But that is, though, again, that system adds dynamics and decision making to how you're playing. So they need to have something like that if they were going to. And again, like, I can't really grasp how well this plays because I can't make the decisions because I literally do not know what people even have at any point in time. Also, I assumed that the pickable passives would have replaced the current passives that we have, the role passives at least, right? That is not the case. Everybody still has every single passive that they have been having. And to me, that makes power level way too high. I assume that the pickable passives were a way to replace the role passives, and that's what this experiment was. That is just not the case. Now it's just making every character a little more powerful than they have been. I really don't like that. I think that the role passives themselves, if we're going to have pickable passives, they need to replace the role passives, right? So that you have to like give and take. It'll make the power level go down, but you'll still have some counterplay and idea and still have some of those old passives in there, right? But yeah, I really don't like the implementation of this. It just seems really, it is quick play hacked, and I'm not going to go too in depth on, like, too hard on them, but it does kind of seem like thrown together and they just kind of put it on top of the game. I don't like how it ended up feeling most of the time, especially just like with how tanks are this patch. I mean, like, it was super hard to kill tanks in general. Like, they just were, especially with extra armor, with extra cooldowns when they're lower. It just felt really, really frustrating a lot of the time. And yeah, basically, I think, I don't know, like, I don't like role passives, but if this were our alternative, I would need the current role passives to go away, or maybe some of them could become one of the pickable ones. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts, first impressions. It's not like I wasn't having fun. It's interesting to experiment and try things, but I think also a lot of times it's hard to even feel the value that some of your passives are doing. And I understand they are passives and you're not really supposed to feel it all the time, but when I'm actively picking them and making the choice to have it, I think there should be some kind of impact or weight felt behind that decision. That's why I really like Last Stand and the close call ones, stuff like that, where I feel like it's really feelable. But things just like you have more armor, it's kind of boring. It's kind of hard to really tell sometimes. Even with Trigger Happy, like, there were characters, even like, I couldn't feel it a lot of the time. Maybe that was muscle memory, just reloading after the certain number of shots, but it doesn't feel as good. And again, I know they're passives, but I think there should be some kind of like, I should know, I should feel that I have this, and I should be able to make a play or do stuff actively around it. Um, and a lot of times it just doesn't come out in practice. So, in my opinion, in the current state that it's in, to wrap up here, it needs some work, and it would only overly complicate things, and I think exacerbate a lot of the problems that we already have with the game. Um, I think there's a way this could be implemented in a style that wouldn't make me that upset, and I would be okay with. But it would require a lot of tuning and being okay with taking some things out. And I don't know if that's exactly what they want to do. But yeah, that is going to do it for me. Tell me in the comments below, what do you guys think about this? Do you like any of these in particular? Do you hate them? You know, anything like that, please let me know. While you're at it, like and subscribe. It does really help me out. This was filmed live, twitch.tv/Lane Hemingway. This is the best way to get in touch with me and talk to me about some of these things. Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays is when I stream. I try and do a discussion every single time I go live. And if you want to send me a rework idea, a hot take, a character idea, anything like that, just talk Overwatch, join my Discord. It's down below. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Have a good day.